Welcome to Biz Meds with Darris and Saad, where we give you the medications for your business. This podcast is all about the minimum effective doses you need to make a massive improvement in your business. Listen and enjoy.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Biz Meds. We are your hosts. My name is Saad.
And I'm Darris.
So for today's episode, we want to talk about the challenges that all business owners face. And, you've probably gathered this throughout the entire journey thus far. Each topic is aimed at helping business owners. So business owners typically face one challenge and then move on to the next one, and
Or five at the same time.
Exactly. And it does get tiresome sometimes, just when you're moving from one to another to another and to another. So
describe the perpetual life of the
entrepreneur,
the existential angst of, why does it always feel like shit?
Yeah, exactly.
Why is it raining garbage today?
You move from one to another, like, it's still shit.
Yes.
So the reality is, that's going to continue happening, especially if there's something that you're working towards and you really want to continue working and growing that area. So as a business owner, you will have those challenges come back year after year, decade after decade. They'll come in different forms. But,
and as you continue, right, the whole idea behind owning a business and entrepreneur is that when you're first starting out, you're solving small problems, and ideally, right, the problems that you solve coincide with the amount of money that you're generating or the amount of revenue and that you're also making. So you start off by solving small problems, and you just increase the size of problems that you're solving, and they become very big problems, and you're getting paid more to solve big problems. But the common denominator through all that is there's always challenges that you're solving. And that can be a very demotivating thing to have to go in, day out sometimes.
Yeah. Again, mentally, if you just think about it, again, it kind of falls in line with our overwhelm episode and the cognitive load episode, where you're constantly feeling like, all right, well, after this hurdle, there's another one, but you don't know what the next hurdle is, right?
Yeah.
So how does one continue persevering through it?
Yes. Yes. How does one? This episode is just one existential question. How does one persevere? Okay, so we can dive into this one. Obviously, we talked a bit about this, and we've done our research on this, and as part of the continual growth that we do and providing the best kind of information to business owners, what we're talking about is really a few things summed up in one word. And people use the word, I don't think they really understand the meaning of the word, but it's grit. And so I think,
like the southern
not the
dish?
sandpaper, not the sandpaper, not grits that you eat, but grit, which was defined by Angela Duckworth and a group of her peers. They did some research, and what they defined grit as is the passion and perseverance for long-term goals. And really, grit is comprised of resilience, determination, and sustained effort. So it's really those three things combined that gives you the passion and perseverance for long-term goals. That's the definition of grit. And I think the main thing or a couple of things to take away from that is one, when they also did their research, they found that grit was a better predictor of success than IQ or talent, which is a huge thing. It's not to say that, if you have a lot of talent and you have a lot of grit, well, then you're gonna have that much more success. But with that,
so just to hop in there real quickly, the really cool thing about that is you can't really measure grit, because with IQ you could do an IQ test.
Yeah.
With grit, it's just time, right?
Yeah, and it's proof.
Yeah, and proof, right?
It's a consistent action because it's built of resilience, determination, sustained effort. So with that, if you are, let's just say you're resilient, but you don't have the sustained effort and the determination, that's the difference. So you can be resilient, which might mean you might bounce back. However, but if you don't have that determination to keep going for sustained effort and sustained length of time to see those things through, that's where it gets challenging. And we can tie that back to struggle phase. So within flow, like getting into flow in a struggle phase, but also struggle phase kind of on the bigger scale where you are in the expectation gap and that exponential growth curve. So you're in the beginning stages. So you're putting a lot of effort in, you're doing stuff, you're getting your teeth kicked in day out, and you don't feel like it's working. Yeah. And it's because like the fruit, the return hasn't come back yet.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have that grit to keep seeing that through,
yeah,
it's not going to happen. So you'll hit that struggle phase. And I think it's extremely relevant. I think it was the last episode we talked, or 2 episodes ago. It was the last episode we talked about. No, it'll be a couple episodes ago. We talked about William James and his speech about the first win, second, third win. That the reason why we don't ever get there is because it's too uncomfortable. We get to that first level of uncomfortableness and we stop. Yeah. Grit is the ability to kind of push through and persevere through that. And so not only is it one of the best indicators for success, it is, I think, really important for people to know and understand that just because you may have not been born with a lot of, let's say, grit and determination, does not mean you cannot learn how to develop that skill, because grit is a skill that you can learn and you can build.
Yeah. 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 No, it's I relate it to as a discipline that, you can develop over time. And it's one of those things, the more you focus on it, the better it's going to get.
Yeah. I think you put it, you said the discipline, it's a discipline of discipline.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a really easy way to look at it. And why it's so important is that it allows you to suffer the rejection, the downsides and things like that. So when you talk about how do entrepreneurs and business owners persevere, well, part of that is going to be, and this is the difference, if you've grown up or you've been led to believe that you are just inherently stuck at that level of grit that you have, well, that's a complete wrong way to think, because the research and everything shows that you can actually develop more grit. You can develop the skill of grit. So, let's talk about like how, so we've defined it. We kind of talked about why it's important and some things like that. Let's start to talk about like, how do you develop it? Like, what are the kind of the first phases? And that really is, again, nothing that we're talking about is really, like, all of our episodes are related because like the neuroscience and all the research is very connected. Yeah. One thing just bleeds into the next. And so this is about finding your why. So that purpose that's also fueled with passion. And that's a really important one. So when you start to align your goals to that bigger purpose, so we talked about this earlier, is that you have to have a purpose that's bigger than yourself. It's something that pulls you towards it. You also have to have that passion, right? That pushes you, that gives you that fire. It's the fuel that ignites that thing to go towards that. Because if you have, that purpose, but you don't have the passion to see it through, well, it's never going to happen. And then the other side is, if you have a whole lot of passion, we talked about, but you don't have the purpose to regulate it, well, then it's a lot of you in the way and trying to do all these things. And you're not really going to be really successful, because you'll just be throwing your energy around at everything. Yeah. Because you don't have anything to funnel that into that's bigger than yourself. And things that are more selfish, let's just say for all intents and purposes, are not going to be as successful, because you tend to see greater impact when it's pulled outside of yourself.
Yeah. And exactly how you said, a lot of energy, but it's aiming at nothing. Yeah. It's just throwing it out there. Yeah. And not getting to the thing that you really want to accomplish. Yeah. Because you don't know, you don't have a purpose.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with somebody a little while ago, and it's just in passing, and I actually met him at like a car meet, and we were talking about just growth in general and like things we want, and the guy was talking about how he really wanted things, like that was his like passion and purpose, and like he just wants to have all the things he's always wanted. So my obviously first question was like, what if you have the things you want, then where do you go from there? It's like, well, then I'll want more things. It was like, but at certain point, like you just kind of find yourself with so many things, but nothing that is giving you meaning.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of weird, because a lot of times people think their purpose is to have all the things and be giving them to other people.
Let's be fair. I was like that at one point in my life.
Oh,
too,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And hopefully you are fortunate enough to have that thought or that belief system kind of shattered a bit.
Yeah. And it's again, so the mind is ever growing, right? The more you learn, hopefully, the more you learn, the more you realize that there are things that are just distracting you from what it is that you should be doing.
Yeah. Or there's a lot of times you don't realize how distracted you are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's very valid. And I think there's a lot of people like that. And hopefully this helps to kind of realign that. And that's why purpose is so important. It's, you talk about people that, so that person obviously valued things. There are other people, let's just say people who go to medical school for years and years and years, and they spend a lot of money. They go through a lot, like they incur a lot of debt. They have a lot of really terrible sleep schedule or no sleep for days on end. And they go through a lot of things, right? And it's, for some, maybe there's a little bit of motivation there for the paycheck at the end of it. But a lot of that, I would wager very heavily on, is that there's a true desire to want to help people on a bigger sense, which is that why it's so important to have that purpose or that why to help pull you through. Otherwise, why would you endure all of that and go through that much? And because you're really far behind in terms of like a financial standpoint when you come out of medical school, because you've been practicing or you've been going for so long and you're not paid really well at all until when you finally come out, and then it takes years again for that to happen. So, what is it that really fuels that? Yeah. And that's why that purpose is so important. So
yeah, and then when you're at this doctor example you just shared, when you're at the finish line, everyone wants to be like you, but nobody wants to do the work to be like you.
Yeah, what is it? I saw a quote, Chris Wills, I think said it, and it was Jimmy Carr said, everyone is jealous of what you have. No one is jealous of how you got it.
Exactly. It's just insane because, sorry, just a quick little example. So I've been working out for 13 years, and I'm not like, I know, right? Just rookie numbers, right? Get those, pump those numbers up. Yeah, exactly. Do 2 workouts in a day. So
if you did the 1 month day, you could work out for equivalent of 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. 2 years and like an entire month. You just played the game, bro.
I totally derailed that. Sorry.
No, that's thank you for adding some humor. So I've been working out for 13 years, and I'm by far like I don't think I'm the pinnacle of health or whatever, but I'm doing well. I'm healthy. Mm-hmm. I'm happy with like how I look. And one time, a guy that had never worked out was saying behind my back that I was on steroids. And he was like, there's no way anybody can look like that unless they're on steroids. And I was like, if you think this is what steroids look like, buddy, like, I don't know what to tell you.
You need to go do some research.
Exactly,
you need to go on the internet.
And again, just an example of like how people see the end result and they think like, there's no way you can, but don't understand that it took 13 years to get there, right?
Yeah, and, the ups and downs, the starts, the stops, everything else, right? And they see where you are and they just, they minimize it so easily.
I remember you also sharing a story about when you were doing your leg press and you had it like fully stacked and some guy walked by and was like, what are you doing here? Like, how are you able to do this? Or something like that. I don't remember the exact story, but I just remember you showing me the picture of the weights. And yeah, it's like people see that, but they don't understand that, you added weights over time.
Yeah.
It wasn't an overnight thing, right?
Yep. People dismiss all of that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So as we get back into grit, right, we talked about a lot of things so far. More importantly, we just talked about why it's important to find your why, and with that is the idea of touch on it a bit, is intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic's just that internal motivation. So why we do something, mostly because it's important and it takes meaning for us, right? Versus in extrinsic motivation, which is usually money, recognition, all those things. And when we have some of those extrinsic motivation factors, if we're basing if we're going to do something on that, it's typically not as sustaining as when it's more heavily driven intrinsic. And again, that just reinforces why it's important to have that purpose, because that helps pull and will help us to kind of persevere and have that determination, the resiliency more and more towards something. So, I mean, you see that with extreme athletes. A lot of them don't go for, like, they're not in it for medals and things like that, right? They're in it mostly because of they're pushing their own limit of what they can do and what that means to them. Inevitably, some will go to X Games or do whatever, but there's a lot of them that don't. Yeah. And they're just simply, they love what they do and they have purpose in it. And for them, they're intrinsically motivated to push themselves and find meaning in it. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part of that.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add?
No, that was a good point. When you said, like, a lot of people kind of do it for themselves, especially at that level, nobody really cares about that little medal, because you can get one printed, made from somewhere, and it
listen, in this day and age, apparently just showing up gets you
get
a medal.
Right? And it takes away from the effort and the time and the dedication you've put into becoming the best version of yourself.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so how do we then, so we talked about what grit is, why it's important, and now, like, how do you, as you're trying to go forward, how do you develop more grit, more perseverance? And some of that is really about just creating, like, taking the small wins and creating habits. And, like, when we talk about grit, it's not just about pushing through those hard times. It's about creating really easy systems that help you do something consistently, right? That's all that it is. So it's the discipline of discipline. That's what it is. And, you talked about it, I know, in a couple of different episodes, we talk about it quite a bit. It's that idea of, what's something that you can do? Can you focus on just doing one thing, like 1% better every day? And that is, like, that's a really, I know it sounds overly simplified, but that's what it is. It's taking something or finding something that interests you, that you want to do something, not trying to go 1,000% into it, but can you break it down to something smaller? So I'll relate this back to myself to give you an idea that a few years ago, before I went to Italy, and I was like, wow, I in university, I took a couple courses because I wanted to learn how to speak to my grandparents who immigrated from Italy. I wanted to be able to speak with them more fluently. And so I learned a little bit. And then this was something that was important to me. So I got an app, and for now it's been 772 days straight, right? I've layered in a 30-minute, it's like 28 to 30-minute exercise or lesson every day, but I layered into my daily routine of when I'm getting ready. I start it before I get in the shower, and I have it so it's playing and I'm doing the lesson, and I layer in that thing. And so for now, like, if you look at it, if I ever think, oh, wow, I don't have determination, I don't have grit, I can look back and be like, I have just done something 772 days straight for 30 minutes every day. Like, if that doesn't tell you that you've developed some grit and you have something to then rest on, I don't know what will. But it's a very simple thing, is to take something, break it down, and layer it in to a current habit or current routine that you're already doing to kind of build that success and take those small wins. And that is a very simple, easy way to help to start to develop the skill of grit.
And I want to add to that story a little bit, because the one thing I've noticed whenever we're out and about, and say you run into somebody that speaks a foreign language that you've kind of practiced, you do make an effort to put your skills to the test a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it's not at all, and I know sometimes people take it that way, but not at all like trying to show off that I know more than one language.
Yeah.
It's, you've practiced this. What are you practicing it for? For a real life scenario, right? So when you come up to that type of opportunity where you can actually utilize it, why wouldn't you utilize it? Right?
Yes. Well, that's the whole point, right? So we're that is exactly why I do it, because I'm risking the failure to learn and put it into practice so I can continue to develop that skill, right?
Absolutely.
Which is the whole point. So that when I'm in Italy and we're in Italy and walking around, that I'm very comfortable walking and talking around. And now that I have a certain, I'm not saying I'm fluent, but my ability to just converse in Italian is great, so much greater than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So
I got two quick little stories around that too, that I can, so one, when I met with John Maxwell, he was talking about, he writes all his books by hand, and he's got similar concept where every day, just 5 lines. That's at the minimum I have to do.
Yep. Some
days like your brain starts flowing and you do more than 5 lines, but on days where you don't feel like it, minimum just 5 lines. And a lot of times people are obviously wondering, like, how are you able to put out this book in a year? All I do is just write 5 lines every single day. Yeah. Right. And for me, what I do is I live by this internal compass that would the tomorrow morning version of me be proud of what I did yesterday? Right? Because whenever you wake up in the morning, that's when you have clarity, and that's when you kind of reflect sometimes on, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have, I had a massive slice of cake at 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. right before bed. Like, so little things like that, just,
which is decision fatigue.
Yeah, exactly. So, just that's kind of what I employ.
Yeah.
And
that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
You had another story. You said you had a couple stories.
That was the 2 stories.
Oh, those 2 stories.
Yeah.
Oh,
the one was you obviously adding to, because I've seen it firsthand, right?
And that, so I think the thing that supports building in those habits of small wins is there's another part of that which supports it, is you have to have a growth mindset. You have to have the want to learn and to better yourself and to push kind of those boundaries a bit. If you are completely closed off to learning, then and you're probably not listening to this podcast anyway, so it doesn't really matter. We're not talking to you. So it doesn't really matter. Whereas you view the challenges as opportunities, right? Versus, oh, this is just another thing I have to endure, and when is it ever going to stop, right? And I had a good friend of mine. We were sitting down last weekend, and he challenged me with a really great thought, and it was challenging how I perceive challenges. And he didn't do it directly. He was just saying, this is how I view it. And it was, what lesson is this here to teach me? And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, yep, that is exactly it. Like that is how we should be, or that is a great way to look at something. So, okay, what is the lesson that this is trying to teach me versus, oh, like I'm getting mad at this, or this opportunity is really getting me angry. It's what is this here to teach me about myself? And that completely flips that around. And so if you're going through stuff and you're continually seeing challenges, that's probably a good question for you to ask yourself, is what lesson is that there to teach you? Yeah. So, okay. So resilience training. So we've talked about, okay, how do you do that? Now, how do you, again, train more resilience? Yeah. So resilient, like training resilience is about, I touched on it when you brought the story of when I'm practicing kind of like the language
Real life
stuff with people,
scenarios.
real life scenarios, right? And that's that, because I look at it, and the underlying thing I'm talking about here is, how do we reframe failure? How do we view failure, and how do we reframe it? Because if we continually look at it from a point that it is failure, that's how we'll want to avoid it, right? Versus, is it something that it's part of the journey, it's part of the learning process, and by putting yourself in those challenging situations, like, that's how you grow. So that's the idea behind it, is we train resiliency by not only looking at the challenges and stuff like that, or potential for failure as failure, but we have to reframe it in our mind as, it's almost like, these are the dues I have to pay for success, or these are the challenges that I need to go through. You know, whatever that mental reframing that you need to go through is what's going to help you train yourself to become more resilient and have a more skill of grit.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think was it Edison who famously tried 10,000 different ways to create the light bulb,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I just need to find the one.
Yeah.
That's it."
Yeah.
And how many times do we allow things to keep us down because, oh, that didn't work. Oh, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or we just need to find the one.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you just said, like, what lesson did it teach me?
Mm-hmm.
And like in Edison's case, like, it taught him 10,000 ways it doesn't work. Right?
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, like stuff like this just fires my brain, and I get so excited because that is the reality of this thing. Is it's all learning.
It's a
So when
mental
you-
game.
Yeah.
Right? It's shifts in mental perspective.
Yeah.
And how we view one thing one way, but if we look at it from a different angle, we can make it mean something completely different and much more meaningful if we're willing to do that.
Yeah. And it goes back to when you said, are you of a fixed mindset or a growth mindset?
Yes.
So the growth mindset would see the opportunity on how to improve and what not to do again, whereas the fixed mindset would just continue going against the wall, right?
So I probably have given up way before and said it's impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
There's
The
no
continued struggle phase. Oh, yeah, I've tried all those things. It'll never work.
Yeah, you're on steroids.
You're on steroids. Oh, you're gonna open that business. You know, businesses, they 9 out of 10 fail in the first 5 years. Okay, well,
You're only
great.
running a business because you got a small loan of $1 million.
All those things.
Yeah.
Right. So then with, we talk about, okay, so there's that part of it. So reframing failure. And then there's another part, which is managing stress and cognitive load. I mean, we cannot say enough that people do not realize just how much mental energy they're continually burning for no reason, because they don't see their brains as having a finite amount of resources. And they think that if I just push more, if I just keep working harder, it is not about working harder. It's not about working longer hours. Like, none of that, like, that's a fallacy that we've been led to believe. And like the hustle culture and all this stuff, is there are way more effective ways of doing things. And if you look at nature, look at things, are we saying that there are times where you don't have to put in a lot of energy? That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is you cannot work at 100% indefinitely. Look at anything. Nothing can sustain that level of output indefinitely. You just can't. Things fall apart.
Yeah.
The same thing happens with your brain and then your life, which depends on it. You operate at that kind of mental load, things fall apart because you cannot sustain it. So you have to be able to manage the stress, manage the cognitive load. So you have to eliminate those things, which is why we built the masterclass of Burnout to Breakthrough, how to finally reclaim your life, which is a neuroscience-backed masterclass, to help give you that extra horsepower. Again, because that is an important part of developing grit, having that skill. Because if you're always tapped out, well, then how do you even have the space to practice even more grit or things like that, right? It's just going to burn you out and cause you to quit. Part of that will be, on the stress management side are things like, is really, again, the things that I can't say good enough things about it are mindfulness. So some type of meditation or just gratitude or something like that, and not for the airy fairy type stuff that probably comes to a lot of people's minds, but because of the emotional regulation that it brings and your ability to then re-regulate your emotions and make better decisions because you're railing back, you're not allowing your emotions to take over. And by having mindfulness or great gratitude and things like that, you can interject a point between an action and a reaction. And that's the whole point. That's the main benefit that I found from that, is that it creates a spot where you then start to recognize that you can take a detour from what the previous hardwired reaction was, that emotional reaction, and you can detour that into a much better action. And then exercise, obviously, most people don't even take part in, and we all know it's beneficial, and yet we don't do it. You want to talk about like also helping to develop the skill of grit? Go for a walk every day. Yeah. Develop the grit of just going for a walk for 15 to 30 minutes and tell me that that's not difficult.
Yeah. And it's so funny because so if you put time in that, and you've talked about this before, like if you put time in a different type of perspectives, hey, go for a 10-minute walk versus go for or play video games for 10 minutes. Right? Like,
yes.
Anybody is always going to be like, oh, the 10 minutes is not enough. But 10 minutes for a walk, it's people are pissed off at you. It's like, well, how dare you tell me to go for a walk? Like, you tell me I'm not healthy. I'm like,
or scroll Instagram for 10 minutes. Oh, exactly. It's 20 minutes gone.
Yeah.
Right? Because that whole, our experience of time is much more important than what the actual function of time is.
And so with the Instagram scroll, you get the dopamine hit right away.
Yeah.
With the walk, you get it 10 minutes after.
Yeah.
You don't get it right away. Right?
Yeah.
So
we're not like, we think about going for a walk. We have a lot of negative associations with that. It's cold outside, or this is going to happen. I got to put my shoes on. I got to do all this work. And there's no positive anticipation of good that happens. And dopamine is that, it's the right before.
Yeah.
And it,
I'll find something funny.
I'm gonna. That's that motivational thing. Yeah, it's like let's go. Boom, it's coming.
Yeah,
right. It's the anticipation that it's gonna hit, and that's the driver of because if you have the two, it's like you're gonna get a quicker hit of dopamine from opening up your phone and scrolling versus putting your shoes on and all that stuff, because they're the amount of perceived effort to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So even going to the gym is the amount of perceived effort to go there, and I got to lift all this heavy stuff. I'm going to sweat. It would be uncomfortable. Right. So, I don't think I have much more to say on that. I think the idea of grit in and of itself, I think mostly people need to understand that it is a skill.
Yeah.
And because up until this point in your life, you believe that you didn't have a lot of grit or resiliency, determination, and all that, doesn't mean that that's the case for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that your destiny's been written and you're hard coded, right? It is like any other skill. It's like developing the skill of flow. You can learn it and you can get better at it.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time and effort. And there's going to be a long time comparatively when you start to see a lot of benefit from that.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that's in that exponential kind of growth curve where and all that means is there's just such a delayed accumulation of benefit that happens over a longer period of time. But when it starts to go, it really starts to go, and you notice a lot more. But in the beginning, you expect that because you're putting this energy into it, you're selling it as all this return, but the return is like minimal in the beginning. And then it's like, putting $1 a day into a bank account that pays you 1%. Yeah. And then over time that really starts to compound. But in the beginning, it feels like you're getting nothing.
You're nothing. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And that's a huge demotivator, because you're like, well, why am I even doing this? That in and of itself is the developing of the discipline of discipline, which is grit.
Yeah. And to add to that, it's I just lost my train of thought. What I was going to say is that a lot of times people just immediately turn away because they see that journey is long. Mm-hmm. And again, nothing new that we're saying. See the journey that is very long and immediately want to turn away and don't want to put in any effort into that. Yep. Because now that's going to require 772 days to get to your level.
Yeah.
But comparison is the thief of joy. So immediately you start comparing to somebody that's much further ahead, right, you are already losing.
Yeah.
You compare yourself to the guy you were yesterday, or to the girl you were yesterday, to the person you were yesterday. Right. And
one of my mentors told me, he said, Darris, when was the best time to plant a tree? 40 years ago. Can't argue with there, John. He says, when was the next best time to plant a tree? Right now. Yeah. Right. So yes, you could have done it years ago, but the next best time to start is right now. Yeah. So developing this skill of grit is something that can happen right now. So for those of you listening, it's pick something, right? Again, the idea of the 1%, pick something, an easier thing. We're not asking you, if you're looking at trying to get healthier, to then clean up all your meals, eat nothing but clean food for 60 days and go to the gym every day for 2 hours. It's not what we're saying. Is pick the one thing, the 1% that you could be doing better, and layer that in to something. Mm-hmm. So if it's a walk, find a way to layer that into a routine, right? If it's a lunch break, go for, before you eat your lunch, maybe just take a 10 or 15 minute walk and get consistent and develop the discipline and the grit of doing that consistently. And then use that to then layer in something else, and then use ways to do that. And if you are feeling like it's even harder, like that's hard, then you need to sign up for our masterclass called Burnout to Breakthrough, which is the neuroscience-backed masterclass to finally reclaim control of your life, where we will walk through specific steps to help reduce your cognitive load and get you back more time and freedom back into your life to be able to do those types of things.
Yeah. And I just remembered what I was going to say earlier. As everything, this is all mental. It's all in your head. And when I say that, I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying, because it's such a vague thing when people say like, oh, you know what? It's all mental. It's all mental. The truth is it is, because, for example, this for grit, if you set up a discipline where you're just 10 minutes a day, go for a walk. But when time comes when you have to go do the walk and you let yourself off the hook, now you've created like a reoccurring habit where you're like, oh, you know what? If I don't do it, I'll just back away. It was like, do it again another day.
Yeah.
But now you've created a cycle where you can back out whenever you want to.
Which is why we go back to finding the purpose. Mm-hmm. Finding something that is really important. It's more important for you to say yes to than to say no to. Yeah. And that's going to help with that resiliency, the determination, and that kind of that ongoing persistency there, and developing that skill of grit. Yeah. So,
and my question would your tomorrow morning version of you be proud of what you did yesterday or not? Yep.
Awesome. Okay, we are going to end it there. We've gone a little bit later than normal, but from time to time we will. So that happens. For everyone that's watching and listening, wherever you are, thank you very much. To Saad's mom, to my mom, thank you both. We appreciate everyone that that has been with us from the beginning. If you're new, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button, ring the bell, and get notification whenever we drop a new episode, which is usually every Monday morning, unless there's a holiday, in which case we will usually drop it on the Tuesday. But usually every Monday morning, without fail, we'll be releasing a episode. So we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Remember, you're just one day away from the life you've always dreamed about. We will see you in the next episode.
Thank you.